Okay, my name is Carrie Cannon, and I work for the Hualapai Cultural Department alongside Bennett, and I was asked to go on this trip to talk about the ethnobotany of the Hualapai tribe, and that's just a term that means how a particular tribe uses their plants, and that can be either for food, for subsistence, for utilitarian use, like for baskets, or for medicinal uses. So I was going to talk a little bit about the history of the Hualapai tribe, touching on what Bennett has already covered, give a little bit of historical context, and that kind of enlightens where we are in the present time, and it does relate to how the use of wild plants has changed as a result of the history. And so in 1776 was the first time that any Hualapais came in contact with a non-Indian person, and that was Francis Garces. He was a Franciscan missionary, and he was coming through proselytizing, and the Hualapai took no interest in it, and he went on his way, and I believe he may have ended up at Hopi. Is that right? So it was another 70 years before there was any more contact with outsiders, non-Indians, and that was around approximately in the 1850s. There was mineral resources discovered in the vicinity of Hualapai territory, and that kind of set off a chain reaction. The cavalry came out to seek railroad routes towards the west, towards the Pacific. Miners came flooding into the area and trespassing through Hualapai country, and that proceeded along a line where more mineral resources were discovered. One in Prescott, I believe, was one of the first. Several in Mojave County, which is in the heart of Hualapai territory. And so as this happened, there was more and more contact with non-Indians, with the encroaching white settlers, and that caused, of course, conflict over resources. And so this there was little skirmishes here and there, and it sort of came to a head in 1866. What happened was one of the white settlers had killed one of the Hualapai chiefs, Chief Wabayuma. And so this spearheaded a strong reaction, and so it kind of set the stage for the Hualapai Wars subsequently. And so the next several years, the cavalry waged war against the Hualapais, and it was back and forth. And there's quite a bit of history about this. The Hualapai, they weren't as well armed as the cavalry. They weren't as well mounted, but they were pretty ingenious, and they used a system of trade networks. If I remember correctly, the Utes had acquired firearms from the Mormons through trade, and then the Paiutes got the firearms from the Utes, and then the Paiutes to the Mojaves, and the Mojaves to the Hualapai, and that was the manner in which they acquired firearms to fight the cavalry. And I'm pretty sure that was the order of the tribes. But so that was the lengths that they had to go to become as well firearmed as to match the cavalry, in addition to the bows and arrows that they had. And so throughout the years, the cavalry came through, and they would come upon a village site, and they would burn the wickiups, and they would find the food caches, and they would destroy them. And looking through some of these journals of the cavalry, it subsequently provides a lot of information about the ethnobotany of the Hualapai tribe, because the archaeological record shows that the Hualapai were very much a mescal agave people, and that's what they subsisted off of. And that, in fact, is true, but Another thing that they subsisted off of was a wild grass seed that grew in the valleys in the summertime. And there was half a dozen valleys where these various grass seeds grew and were harvested. And one account from a cavalryman's records mentioned burning 1,000 pounds of these grass seeds. And so through looking at these records, it sheds light on the fact that this also was another resource that was very important, that maybe has been overlooked from some of the recent talk about mescal agave. But coming back to this historical timeline, with all this happening, the Hualapai fought to the very bitter end, and what ended up happening was not having as many firearms and being mounted and having to deal with their villages burning and their food caches being destroyed. They ended up being rounded up at Camp Beale Springs, which is presently outside of Kingman, Arizona. And they were interned there. They were held there for approximately a year before it was decided they were to be moved down to La Paz, in the vicinity of the present-day Colorado+River Indian Tribes reservation. And so that was the area that they wanted to just pretty much round up all the Indians, regardless of tribe, put them there, consolidate the Indian problem. Well, the Hualapais, being forced on their Trail of Tears down to La Paz, several hundred miles south, did not comply with this idea, and they stayed down there 1 or 2 years, and it was not the place for them. It was much hotter. They were forced to do various labors and were not fed well and succumbed to various malnutrition and disease. And they decided amongst themselves that they were not going to stay. And so what they did was they made their plan and they fled back to their original homeland. And that history is commemorated each year in the Hualapai community by a race or a run called the Hualapai Trail of Tears, or the La Paz Run, where they reenact and trace their journey back from La Paz all the way back up to Peach Springs, and that happens in the month of April. It's coming up in just about a week and a half. So as they returned, that was about 1873, and so as they returned back to their ancestral areas, what they came to find out was not only was there mining that had taken up a lot of the choice areas where there was water, springs, but also cattle ranching had become a prominent activity. And so those two activities combined pretty much had taken up the choice areas of a Hualapai land where somebody could have a living. And so they were kind of living on the fringes and didn't have many options. And so as a result, they took up work in the mines and the railroads and wherever there was something available. And also they practiced some of their subsistence culture, hunting and gathering, alongside becoming a part of the cash economy. And so eventually there was issue with the fact that they didn't have a place to be necessarily, and so by 1883 they were a reservation was delineated for them, and that was through an executive order. And so that's something interesting to note when you consider a lot of the history of American Indian tribes in the Americas. Is many of the reservations came about through treaty, where lands were ceded and then rights were retained and a reservation was retained. In this instance, they had fought to the bitter end. They had not signed a treaty. They came back to their homeland and through various circumstances ended up having a reservation delineated through an act of Congress or through an executive order. And so that that brings us more to a more contemporary time.